So XMuse is a concert series, a quarterly concert series of exclusively experimental music. And I'm very interested both in as a composer, performer, and a curator in experimental music. So XMuse is really my heart and what I love about music and want to present to people about music. I think experimental music has particular relevance to the visual arts community, to the community who are not trained as musicians and are not interested in classical music. Even though both you and I have classical music training, it's not necessary to enjoy and benefit from experimental music. And to define experimental music, it's generally music that's on the fringe, that pushes limits as far as aesthetics, even how loud, how soft things are, how music is structured, what sounds you use. Experimental music is really emphasizing sound as opposed to musical sounds. So the sound of me doing this could be considered music, whereas if I'm playing a violin, that's what's normally considered music. So experimental music uses the whole variety of any sound used in the world, any sound in the world to make music with, and that's really exciting and relevant to me, and I think relevant to everyone.
All four of us are coming out of Denton, coming out of UNT, and there's quite a bit of interest in experimental music coming from the composition department at UNT, and there's a lot of very talented performers and very talented composers in Denton. And part of our interest in bringing that talent and those ideas down to Dallas is exposing this kind of music to a larger community that has a bigger population and more general interest in the arts.
First of all, I feel that experimental music is somewhat represented in Denton, but the works and the concerts and the composers that I feel are really important to me are not as represented as I think they should be. And I think that bringing those composers and the work that I think is important to Dallas is particularly interesting because Dallas has a thriving visual arts scene. Dallas, the artistic community in Dallas is interested in experimental film, one of my absolute favorite art forms. Dallas is interested in all these things which completely intersect with experimental music. So I think it's very important for us to bring experimental music as musicians from Denton to Dallas, both to broaden the Dallas community's perspective of music and perspective of how music intersects with the artistic mediums they're more familiar with, as well as showing the musicians from Denton that, look, Dallas has a lot to offer. What you're doing in house shows and at these different bars in Denton is not the end-all be-all of the area. Dallas has a lot to offer, and the community in Dallas is really interested in what we're doing, is really interested in the work that is active and going on in Denton.
So many of the composers who consider themselves being involved in the experimental music world will likely offer connections back to John Cage. In the early 50s, John Cage wrote a piece called 4 minutes and 33 seconds, which is a very famous piece, and it's all silence. And I'm remembering one story that Cage told about going into one of these quiet chambers that have padded walls and are designed so that no sound comes in. And so he sat in there for a little while and noticed that he was hearing two frequencies. One was a high-pitched, kind of piercing sound, and the other was a lower humming roll. And when he left, he asked the engineer what those might have been. Maybe there was some error in the audio chamber. And the engineer explained, well, the high pitch is probably your nervous system, and the low pitch is probably your circulatory system wrapping around close to your eardrums, and you can hear the sound of your blood flowing around. And that's when John Cage realized that there really is no such thing as silence. There's always sound all around us, even the sound that our own bodies are creating. And experimental music recognizes that a lot and tries to take all of the sounds around us a lot of times and consider them deeply and consider how they can be utilized and molded into new experiences, even though they're experiences that we have on a day-to-day basis. But like you were mentioning with the chauffeur, ear cleaning exercises, we might not acknowledge them. And not all, but a lot of times experimental music tries to teach that in some way, especially that coming out of this sort of Cagean tradition of silence.
I see XMuse as a point of contact for the different artistic communities in DFW. I see it as a point of contact for professional musicians who play regularly in large organizations in Dallas, at the Dallas Symphony. I see it as a contact point for people interested in visual art, in experimental film, or film as a whole, in theater. And I see all of these communities coming together to enjoy work that is an intersection of these disciplines. And even if we're just talking about music here, it's just a concert of music, I think it has worth to offer all of these different communities. And I think the way that it challenges your mind, the way experimental music pushes simply your perception is something, it's very meditational. I think it's something that every person can benefit from. Every person can benefit from actually listening to the sound of the room you're in. Because people don't. Our brains can't process that much information. So being able to do that, and to do that in a focused, concentrated way, is absolutely beneficial to us as human beings. And so I would love for all these artistic communities to enjoy the world around us together in this way.